The Ballad of Isolde and the Wanderer, a winter of ice and gold. Winter had gripped the land with an unforgiving hand. Snow lay heavy on the treetops of the pines, and the biting wind cut like an invisible blade through the bare branches. The sky stretched out in dark, brooding shades, as if it sought to smother every flicker of life beneath it. High above the fields and forests, Castle Hohenfels loomed like a silent sentinel of stone and history. Its towers pierced the leaden sky, its walls bore the scars of centuries of storms and battles. Yet within its grand halls, life raged on, an opulent feast so lavish it could have fed an entire town. Lutes played, fiddles sang, voices rang out beneath the high ceilings. Servants hurried between the long tables, their trays laden with steaming venison, honey cakes, and heavy silver goblets filled with spiced mead. Knights boasted of their heroic deeds, their laughter echoing against the stone walls, while noble women cast demure glances from beneath their lowered lashes. But one figure, the center of all this revelry, remained apart from it all. Isolde, daughter of the mighty Baron of Hohenfels. Her golden hair cascaded in soft waves over her shoulders, her gown, of the finest velvet, embroidered with silver thread, was a masterpiece of craftsmanship. And yet, she did not feel like the radiant bride they celebrated tonight. She was a bride without a choice. Her father had announced her betrothal to Siegfried of Eichenfurt, a knight of great standing, whose wealth and influence would solidify the power of their house. Siegfried was a man of undeniable strength. His armor was of the finest steel, his blade had felled countless foes, his voice could silence a hall with a single command. But his eyes were cold. Whenever his gaze fell upon Isolde, she felt an invisible chain tightening around her heart, a shiver creeping through her veins like ice. She could not live with him. Not in this castle, not in this life that had been thrust upon her. Beyond these walls, a world awaited, a world she longed for, and somewhere out there, he was waiting. The Wanderer, Lucien, her heart clenched at the memory. How many years had passed since she last saw him? A spring, a forest in bloom, a man whose songs had bewitched the wind. He had told her tales of distant lands, of adventures beyond the seas, of sunrises that burned in colors she could not even imagine. He had shown her a world beyond courtly manners and political games. And then he was gone. His songs had faded, but his voice still lived in her. She had to find him, escape into the night. The cold stung her face as she crossed the castle courtyard. Each breath sent small clouds into the darkness, while her boots left tracks in the fresh snow. The wind tugged at her cloak, played with the loose strands of her hair, as if trying to hold her back. The guards at the gate were drunk on mead from the feast. Their laughter echoed against the walls, their faces flushed red as they bickered over meaningless things. Quietly, Isolde slipped through a hidden side passage and out into the winter night. The forest was silent. Only the distant howl of a wolf broke the eerie stillness. She ran. Her heart pounded. Her hands clutched the fur of her cloak as her feet sank into the deep snow. And then, a song. Soft, distant. A gentle melody drifting through the night like the whisper of a forgotten dream. Her steps slowed, the melody became clearer, and then she saw him, standing at the edge of the frozen lake. His cloak was old and worn from his travels, his hair slightly longer than before, but his stance was straight, his gaze warm and full of stories. Lucien, the Wanderer. The years had not changed him? Or had they? His face seemed older, his smile more melancholic. But when he saw her, his eyes lit up as they once had. "You," she whispered. He smiled. "I knew you would find me." And then, without another word, she fell into his arms. The choice. The night by the lake became an hour of revelation. Isolde told him of her betrothal, of the cold halls of the castle, of the emptiness that surrounded her. Lucien listened, his fingers absently playing with a snowflake that had landed on his sleeve. "I have searched everywhere for a place to belong," he said at last, "but nowhere has ever felt like home." His gaze held hers. Until now. A gust of wind swept across the lake, making the ice beneath them creak. "I can't go back," she whispered. "Then come with me." The words were simple, yet they carried the weight of an entire world. Isolde placed her hand in his, and together they vanished into the darkness of the forest. The hunt and the Baron's judgment. But the past could not be left behind so easily. Siegfried would not let his bride slip through his fingers. His men found them after days of pursuit. Lucian fought, his movements as fluid as a dancer's, his dagger flashing in the moonlight as he tried to hold them off. But he was only one man against 6 armored knights. Blood stained the snow. Then, Hoofbeats, a rider, the Baron of Hohenfels. He had come searching for his daughter, and now he stood there looking down at her and the man who lay wounded in the snow. And in that moment, he saw the truth. He had nearly condemned his daughter to a loveless life. "Let him go," he said quietly. Siegfried whirled around. "My lord, let him go." His voice left no room for argument. The swords lowered. Lucian lived, and with the coming of spring, a wedding was held. Not in a castle, but beneath blooming trees, where the wind carried their ballad into the world. Isolde had found her freedom, and with it, her love. A story never to be forgotten.